have a quick request of you again, just to loosen yourself up, bounce up down a little bit, loosen your arms up. That's it. Breathe. Come on, lads. That's the one. There you go. Now, I've got a real treat for you. I want you to open your mind to something if you don't already know this stuff, because a lot of people don't seem to. If you want to be well, you want to really have health and vibrancy, you need to understand what really makes you ill. And it's not what most people think. During the whole COVID thing that went on, that was a complete manipulation of people's minds and wasn't what anybody thought, I decided at that point, in addition to what I knew about health, I'm going to take all the presumptions and assumptions I had about health and throw them out the window and start afresh and ask questions and dive into it and start to figure out what the fuck was really going on. And as I went through that, I started to realize something. I came across a really amazing book by Dawn Lester and David Parker, who dedicated 10 years of research, and it's called What Really Makes You Ill: How Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease Is Wrong. And I reached out to them after I read the book, said it was incredible, and did an interview with them. And I reached out to Dawn subsequently, and over time we've become good friends. I've met her face to face a few times. Absolutely brilliant woman, got so much time for her. She's full of wisdom. I asked her, Dawn, would you come on and just tell you on this course exactly what goes on with health, give a summary of it? And I'm delighted that she stepped up and she agreed to do that. So for the next hour and 20 minutes or so, I'd like you to have a listen to my conversation with Dawn, specifically for you to get a grip or a better understanding of what actually really makes you ill. And I'm going to suggest something as well, is that you get a copy of that book and you have a read of it. It's absolutely breathtaking. So without further ado, please join me and Dawn and have a listen to this amazing conversation, and you might want to take some notes as well. Dawn, it's so lovely to see you again.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and talk to us about, your book, about what really makes you ill, because that book was a revelation to me. I had pieces of that puzzle, but I didn't have all the pieces of it. And when I read yours and David's book, it was just a kind of light bulb, mind blown moment. It was amazing. So I was hopeful over this discussion you could summarize what actually happens to make people ill and put to bed some of the common misconceptions people have. And I'm also going to recommend that people do take the time to read your book. It's an amazing reference work, I think.
Thank you. Yes, it did take a number of years to gather the research together, because there are so many aspects of what we call the health system that don't actually support our health. So once you start finding out some of the parts, you need to really look at all of the parts to put it together, to get, the jigsaw pieces to understand what is wrong with the system. It's not just little pieces of it, it's what's wrong with the system. And then raise the question of, well, if that's not what makes us ill, what does make us ill, and what is health all about? Mm-hmm. And what can we do anything about it? And we find that the more you look into it, that it's almost the opposite of what we've been told. So that's why it's quite a large book, because there are so many parts to it, there's so many pieces to understand. But also looks at the history and the background to put it all together, so people have got an overview of why the system is the way it is, the people behind it, the vested interests. And it is about money, but not just about money, to help people understand the problems so that they can start to get a better idea of what they can do. And it isn't to make people fearful, it's to say, this is the information, and this is the information that you need, so you can actually make an informed choice, because what we're told is not actually correct, and people can't make truly informed decisions based on what comes out of the mainstream medical system. So that's really the background to how it started. That's why it is such a large book, because there's so much in it. We thought we just have to put all the pieces of the puzzle together so people can get a good overview, a good understanding. It does require people to get a different view of what health is. And in fact, that's one of the interesting points, is that, you know, on the WHO website, their definition of health is actually really good, you know, because it's about more than just, you know, the absence of disease. It's about, you know, how, you know, good health and well-being. It's about all of us, or all aspects of us. But that's not what the system is about. It's about disease management. So then we have to look at what disease really is, and find that once you start looking, there are no different diseases, which is why the subtitle is Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease is Wrong, because we then have to deconstruct what we think diseases are in order to understand what's going on in the body when we have these symptoms that are called diseases. And so it's a whole process. So do you want me to start with the breaking down what disease is, or go
I
into
think
the
that'd be a
symptoms?
good. I think that'd be a good place to start, and then we can go into the symptoms, because the first bit is more of a foundation, isn't it?
It is. It is to understand that we're given the idea that there are lots of different diseases, and depending on what the symptoms are as to what the disease is. And I put it in air quotes, because once you start looking at it, you realize that whatever these labels are attached to, they're just different combinations of symptoms. So all we're looking at is just different types of symptoms. So the question is, why are these symptoms occurring? And when you start looking at what has been known for many years, many centuries, especially within more ancient systems, you know, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, I mean, the one thing they don't talk about is germs or anything like that. You know, they look at the body as a whole. And that's what the mainstream medical system doesn't do. It looks at different parts. So if there's something that happens in one part of the body, they think it's just a problem in that part, instead of realizing that the body is a whole system. And the body is a self-regulating, interconnected system. So that if symptoms occur in one part, it's not just that part that is the problem. It's an indication of a systemic problem, or maybe not even a problem, a systemic condition.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about symptoms, various symptoms. So there's a whole range. So the more acute symptoms, like runny nose, cough, fever, and things like vomiting and diarrhea, these are, when you understand that these are the ways that the body is actually clearing itself, these are cleansing symptoms, these are the way that the body is actually looking after itself, it starts to make sense that if you eat something that there's a problem with, your body's going to reject it. And that's why the body's, it'll start to purge in some way, whether it's vomiting, diarrhea, or possibly even both. That's because the body is saying, this is not good, get this out. In a very direct manner. So it's not that there is something that has attacked the body, it is the body that is recognizing. And again, that's the other part, to recognize that our bodies are intelligent, they are amazing. There's so much understanding of how the body is, how the body actually functions and works, and it's constantly looking to support itself, to maintain life. It's not just a machine of different parts that may go wrong. The body, we're told the body attacks itself. Well, that's not true, and that's the point, that the body is amazing. And so that's another part of this puzzle that is the complete opposite of what we've been told. So recognizing the body is effectively intelligent, and it's always doing whatever it can to restore homeostasis, to get back to, it's not quite balanced, because I mean there's always a movement around the central homeostasis. So we don't want to be constantly in one place, because obviously there's energy and activity, and if always got a high energy, you've got to be able to sleep, so the body wants to relax. So it's not that static place, but homeostasis is where the body is, everything is functioning well, and then you feel good, and you can be active, mental acuity. So again, it's not just the physical body, it's our emotion and our mind, and so it is a full mind and body connection, because again, the body works through energy, and that's, it's a whole other aspect. So we have to look at the way the body works in a very different way from what we're told, and this can take a while. So again, these symptoms are different symptoms. There are no separate diseases. There is no entity out there called a disease that you get or you don't catch anything. These are conditions that arise within the body due to the various different factors that we can be exposed to, and that's, I assume, what we'll get into in more detail. But it is understanding that we are affected by what happens around us in our environment, by what we do, by everything we come into contact with, by what we eat. So the body is affected. And going back to the work of Bruce Lipton, who in the Biology of Belief said, and again, so genes do not control biology, but the body is affected by the environment, whatever that environment is, and that includes our mental and emotional environment. So
you've frozen there, Dawn.
Quite challenging. So because we are given these different labels, and the whole point of these labels is so that the medical establishment can look up in a book what this label is and then prescribe you something to fix it. But of course nothing fixes it, because in order to address the issues, you have to address the underlying causes. And again, the other thing, of course, with symptoms is that they're perceived, oh, I've got symptoms, there's something wrong with me, it's bad. So again, that's another way of revisiting how we approach when we have symptoms. To say, oh, I have symptoms, right? Okay, my body's purging. What can I do to help support my body to get through these symptoms
and not suppress the purge?
Absolutely not suppress the purge. That's the thing, that the body's doing its best to restore homeostasis, and unfortunately, because of our conditioning, what we tend to do is get in the way by taking some kind of product that will stop the headache, stop the fever, stop the diarrhea, the vomiting. I mean, there are times when you might want to temporarily stop it, if you're traveling, for example, but I mean that's recognized, it's temporary. So we don't want to take anything to stop the symptoms, because that's stopping the body doing what it actually needs to do, which is to clear through whatever the toxins are.
Yeah, so I guess if you suppress it, then the body's going to have to find a place to store it for safekeeping, because you prevented its exit.
Well, the body has got some extra work to do further down the line if you've suppressed it, because because there's new toxins that are coming in. So the body says, okay, well, we might have to shift. That's why sometimes the symptoms stop. They think, oh, well, this, whatever it was, medicine, drug worked because my symptoms stopped. Well, it's because the body said, okay, well, I mean, again, different circumstances. So it's difficult to make very prescriptive statements. So I'm not saying, what the body says, but the symptoms will stop for a reason that is not because whatever it is has gone away. It's because the body has then stopped expressing those symptoms in order to give more energy to the extra toxin that you've just put in, that is generally called a medicine. And if they're pharmaceuticals that have been issued by the medical establishment, they're almost certainly going to be petrochemical based, and the body doesn't recognize petrochemicals as being substances that are natural to it, that it can work with. So it then will see them as something that requires expulsion at some later stage, and maybe sometimes they'll sequester these toxins into a certain place, depending on, again, on the condition of the body. So because we're all different, different people have different symptoms according to their own personal environment.
Yeah, internal environment as well, in terms of you'll get to that as well. That's really interesting. There's a quote by, I think it's Miguel de Cervantes, which summarizes that really nicely, that if you take away the cause, the effect ceases.
Absolutely, and that's what the medical establishment doesn't do. They do not address the causes.
No.
What they do is they manage the symptoms, and in many cases they actually admit that that's what they're doing. It's just to, and but of course in more chronic conditions that's intentional. They'll manage the symptoms, but you'll have to carry on taking whatever it is for the rest of your life or for a long time. And there is, again, we can't really want to go into this, but there's so much evidence, or rather there's no evidence for long-term studies, even if, short-term, that there is some kind of beneficial effect from these pharmaceuticals. I mean, there are no, decades-long studies of pharmaceuticals and interactions, and there's so many different factors that are involved, which
Well, I've read
get
that
into more detail.
the death by correctly dosed and administered pharmaceutical medicine is one of the largest killers on the planet, which is a really interesting thing when you read it.
It is the yes, there's the third in the US. There's the study that says that the medical system is the third biggest killer. The top killer is heart disease. The second is cancer. And I would suggest that most people that have those labels, that have been diagnosed with those conditions, are on many different pharmaceuticals. So I would say that it probably is the leading cause.
Yeah.
And some of it is, the idea, it's not that they're giving the wrong drugs. It's actually they're being prescribed the right drugs, and yet they do not restore health. So yeah, it could well be, once you start looking at it, but I don't think those statistics are available, because I don't think they want anyone looking into that to see just, the real problems with it.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. So in your book then, you say that there are a limited number of ways that you actually get ill. Could you step into that with us now, please?
There are lots of individual things that we can be exposed to that can make us ill. But what we did was we distilled them down into 4 factors. So the first one is nutrition. The second one is toxins, which of course is a huge category of, there's a vast range of substances that come in under that category. The third one is, I was going to say EMFs, but non-native EMFs, because, there is a natural electromagnetic frequencies in the environment, but it's the non-native ones, it's all the extra ones. And the fourth factor is what we've called stress, but it's bigger than what we think of as the normal stress, where you just, I'm a bit stressed today. It's much bigger, because it covers the emotional and psychological aspect of, so it's the mental side of things, and that's a pretty big factor, because it covers quite a lot. And to a certain extent, there's some overlap between all of them, but they're the different categories. Again, it's not to say it's only one of them, because almost always there'll be multiple factors that people are exposed to,
I
and
presume
multiple
you'd
combinations.
have, sorry for over talking, you'd have belief
fine.
then probably in number 4, wouldn't you?
Belief. Oh, yes. So your thoughts, emotions, ideas, beliefs. Yes, that comes under the say stress. It's still finding the one word that covers
Yes.
that encompasses all that mental aspect of it. So it's not about mental health per se. It's larger than that. So it's the emotional belief side of things.
Could you dive a little bit more into nutrition then, and perhaps at some point in that give us some examples of nutritionally related illnesses?
Nutrition is it's a big
Just the broad
area.
concepts of it.
Yes, it's a big area, because there are a lot of people with different ideas about what nutrition is. And from my perspective, it's more about really concentrating on what you are eating, and the more natural the foods are that you are eating, the more you're supporting your body. So, you know, it seems crazy to have to use the word real, but we're talking real food. So anything that's grown or produced, or, you know, if or animal, whether they're animals as well. So anything that is naturally grown, and also, again, because that, like I said, things overlap. So it overlaps with the category of toxins. So this would be food that is grown with minimal or preferably no kind of toxic inputs in any way, shape, or form. So no chemical inputs. And that obviously is getting harder. But the more natural the food is, and the sooner it's eaten after it's been harvested, because again, we've got this storage and distribution. So, you know, foods may look, you know, you may have these natural fruits, but they could have been picked weeks and months ago. I mean, some fruits store better, some vegetables don't, but it's the fresher. And one of the other problems with foods is that, you know, they're picked quite often before they're totally ripe, because obviously and it's to do with the shelf life. So the shelf life. So I know a lot of people look at nutrition from the aspect of these very specific vitamins and minerals. But within a whole food, you've got so much more than just the individual vitamins and minerals, because there are the different aspects that probably haven't even been uncovered. At the same time as the individual minerals, you know, in fruits and vegetables, you've got fiber, for example. And if you were just taking something that's simply one particular vitamin, then you're missing out on these other cofactors that are what your body recognizes as food, and then can assimilate and then draw into creating, renewing, regenerating, continuing to create the body. Because, you know, the conventional idea, and again, there are questions about it, but the body's continually regenerating. So the better the quality of inputs, the better the quality of regeneration as you're working your way through. So it does matter to us, you know, to a great extent, the quality of the food that you're eating.
Mm-hmm. I guess an analogy might be if you were remodeling your house and rebuilding your house, and the bricks turned up, the nails, the plasterboard, the wood, and someone forgot to bring the cement, you could probably build something, but it's not exactly going to be complete or strong or sturdy, is it?
Yes, that's one way of looking at it. Yes, and it is, you
Or a
know, the body.
chocolate cake, you got everything but the chocolate. You're going to get a cake, but not a chocolate cake.
Yes, it's really all, yes, all the ingredients. So you know, I mean, a simple example for when people say about vitamin C, there's only, I think it's something like 30 milligrams, or don't quote me, I can't remember exactly, but it's something, you know, it's only got so much of vitamin C in an orange. But there's so much more to an orange than just vitamin C.
Yep.
And again, if it's organic, picked pretty, you know, if you're growing it yourself and you pick it and there's no, you know, it's not been grown with any pesticides, that will be extremely beneficial compared to, you know, a vitamin C tablet. Now, I know that the soil is depleted, so we have these problems, which is why you know, the ways of agriculture are, you know, so important, how the food is grown. So with deficiencies, the less, or rather the more processed foods that people are eating, and the less natural foods, you know, whole foods that people are eating, their bodies are going to be depleted in the essential components to sorry, excuse me, to be able to keep regenerating. And so there are ideas that there are specific deficiencies will cause certain diseases, but again, this is to the labels. But your body will start to perform and function suboptimally, and so it will be working even harder to be normal. So you're more likely to feel tired, you're more likely to be affected by your environment, by the toxins in your environment. So all kinds of symptoms will start to you'll start to experience all kinds of symptoms, and because the body's really struggling. So it's not that there will be a specific disease, but the body is not going to be functioning. And again, these can affect your mind as well. Because again, the body and the mind are interconnected.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. There was a study I read a long time ago about genetics, and it was to do with pigs. And they took the vitamin A out of the pig's diet, and their offspring were born blind. And they bred that offspring with a very low or vitamin A deficient diet, and the offspring of that were born without eyes, which would suggest, and I'm not in favor of this kind of thing, but it was interesting intellectually. So that would suggest, and that's a genetic abnormality, isn't it? So they give the pigs with no eyes a vitamin A rich diet, and their offspring are born with eyes and sight.
Yes. I'm not saying the individual vitamins are not useful. I'm just saying that focusing on them is
You've got to look at it in terms of the whole picture.
Yes, I was going to say you can't have a rubbish diet and say, oh, well, I'll just take some vitamin C and I'll be all right.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm saying, to focus on that as a substitute for food.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I meant, you know, as to supplement. And again, be careful with supplementation. But yes, I mean, I hadn't actually heard of that study, but that's the kind of thing that can happen, that the body does need the entire range of what are called vitamins and minerals, you know, so there will be deficiencies that will have effects within the body. And like you say, with vitamin A, I know that's connected to the eye. So no, I'm not in favor of those kinds of experiments, but it does give us information about how bodies truly work.
Yeah, it does, yeah, and it highlighted that things that you might consider to be a genetic abnormality, excuse me, are not that at all.
Yes, well, that's the other issue, as well as the claims that that germs make us ill, which they don't, that we're dependent on our genes for our health issues. And again, Bruce Lipton said, you know, the genes do not control our biology. They are affected by the environment, which tells us everything, that the genes are turned on or off according to the environment.
Yeah, they're more like switches.
Yes, yes. You know, they are part of the system, but they are not in control. So manipulating genes does not change the body, like you said, with the vitamin A. That was the factor, not so that there would have been differences in the genes, but the genes weren't controlling it. It was, as you say, the vitamin A.
Yeah, sure, that's interesting. Could you, and it's a little bit outside of what I wanted to talk about, but you've mentioned germ theory a couple of times. Could you dive a little bit into that, about the fact it is just a theory, and maybe talk a little bit about terrain, just to kind of put that into perspective, please?
Yes, that's one of the big factors of the medical system, the whole idea that germs, whether they're called viruses, bacteria, parasites, or fungi, are the actual causes, that they are the instigators of disease, that they can be spread between people, and these diseases are transmitted between people, and even they're even claiming, and well, I mean, they have been claiming for a while now, but they're ramping that up, of these so-called pathogens being transmissible between humans and animals. So and there is, this maybe comes as a surprise to some people, but there is zero evidence for any of the ideas that these things called germs are the cause. Now that goes back to Pasteur, which once you start looking, you realize that he didn't actually start the germ theory, but there were money interests that wanted to promote that, because that, and once you start looking into it, you realize that that is why it has become the dominant model, because it then makes people afraid. So again, this moves into the other factor, the stress, the fear factor. So it keeps people deferring to authority, deferring to external authority, to the medical establishment, and not taking responsibility for their own health, because these what you might call invisible enemies are out there that we can that can attack us, infect us, make us ill. We can transmit all of that to other people, and so that's that's a good way of keeping us afraid, and also keeping us in the idea that we have to defer to them because only they can look after us because of these invisible enemies. And as I said, there is zero evidence, and there never has been any evidence once you start looking into it, that these theories, or this theory about germs, whether it's viruses, bacteria, parasites, they were never actually established. They were just asserted and taken up by the medical establishment, and they keep running different experiments and studies and all sorts of papers just using different terminology, saying that this pathogen causes this disease. It's an assertion, and yet there really is no evidence. So I mean, to even call it a theory is probably not exactly correct. It's more of a hypothesis because it's never even been established to be put into a theory.
When I first read that, I was like, really? Can that be true? And when you actually go digging and you go looking and you try and find like proof for contagion, as an example, there is none. It just that information doesn't exist anywhere.
And there are plenty of studies, certainly through the Spanish flu time, or what's called Spanish flu, the 1918 flu period, that a number of studies were carried out where they were trying to prove contagion, and they couldn't, and they didn't. And they were surprised by what they discovered. I mean, they were doing everything they could to transmit something from sick people to healthy people.
Yeah.
And the healthy people never had the symptoms that they were expecting. They didn't transmit the illness, the disease, the symptoms, the germs. None of it, just isn't there. I mean, this can be found in the public domain. It's just a little bit harder to find. You need to know what you're looking for these days. Yep. But it is out there, and absolutely, as you say, there is nothing to prove that contagion occurs. Now, there are reasons that multiple people in the same space may experience similar symptoms, which may look like, oh, we've got the same disease, we've got the same thing. But it's down to the environment. And when you say, well, what's your similar environment? You're within the same household, you're eating the same food, you're exposed to the same toxins in the atmosphere, the same EMFs, and in many cases, the same belief systems, the same fears, doubts, the same media information that's telling you whatever it is. So you're buying into the same belief systems. So there are lots of reasons, the same energetics, there's also the resonance factor that we're starting to really dive deeper into, and recognizing that, we are energetic beings. And so our energies are going to interact and I'd say not interfere, but certainly interact. And we can be influenced by others, and others can influence us, through our biofields. So that there are explanations for why people will express those similar symptoms in the same place. It's just when people still thinking in terms of labels and disease, or we've got the things that they can actually get, the idea that we get to disease, or we catch a disease, or there is a disease as an entity out there that can attack us. These are still some of the ideas that it's more difficult for people to come out of. But it's the more you look into it, as you say, it makes sense when you say, okay, yes, well, you can understand we're living in the same house, or the same environment, or within the same office. If there's an office cold, or school, the beginning of school term, quite often children may start expressing similar symptoms. You go, well, okay, did they clean the school during the summer holidays?
Exactly.
And what did they use? So
yeah. Particularly aggressive, nasty, noxious, poisonous cleaning chemicals from the lowest bidder, probably.
Yes. that would be one of the factors that I would suggest people look at, instead of saying, oh, there's whatever it is that's spreading around. Well, you know, the children have been out and about in the summer, you know, fresh air, and suddenly they're inhaling these noxious chemicals. Or, you know, have they got new carpets? So again, off gassing from, you know, new carpets.
Formaldehyde and things.
Oh yes, yes, yes. That's one of the many chemicals in these different upholstery, different furnishings, you know, furnishings and fittings, if they clean things.
Yeah, we'll get onto that with toxicity. I think one quick thing to just ask you then on the germ theory was the presence of so-called viruses. You've got bacteria. From what I've read and my understanding of it, in a nutshell, number one is that viruses have never been proven to exist, and maybe you could talk about that a little bit more. And the other one is the presence of these things that they say are causing the disease are simply elements of your body that are there to try and restore the homeostasis. So a bit like they are the fireman that turns up at the side of the fire to put the fire out. But what they're doing is they're conflating that to say, well, the firemen are there, so they must be the cause of the fire. And in fact, that's not the case. They're simply the effect to try and deal with it.
Absolutely, and that is definitely a perfect analogy, and again, one we use in the book for bacteria. Sorry, excuse me, and fungi and parasites as well, which may be a little bit sort of far-fetched for some people to think with parasites. But again, so bacteria, fungi, and parasites do exist. Well, certain parasites anyway. So we're talking about something that, you know, entities that do exist. Now, when we're talking so-called viruses, we're talking something completely different, because there is no evidence that there are entities, that these things that are called viruses, that are supposed to be genetic material in a protein coat.
That look like little space invaders or little spaceships.
They do, yes. I mean, you know, all these coloured things that look like landmines or whatever, that they were given the, you know, with the red or the green or whatever it is. It just, I mean, they are.
You're not suggesting they're all graphics, are you?
Oh, I'm not suggesting, I'm stating it. They are all graphics. They are all CGI, because the only claim about these things called viruses, we give the black and white images where there's a little circular thing with dots around it, and an arrow says, oh, that's the virus. That's a black and white image from electron microscope, and that is just a 2D image. And that process only is the process to get to that image. Once you start looking at it, is ridiculous to say that actually has any kind of meaning, because they don't. And then we get into the word isolation. We know that isolation means separating from everything else, because, you know, they're trying to isolate everyone. So if you isolate something, you have it on its own with nothing else. That's the true meaning. And nowhere, at no time has any particle been isolated that can then be described as a virus. That has never been done. What they do is they take substance from somebody's body, so, you know, sputum or whatever, from somebody who's claimed to have a virus. So that's an initial assumption in the first place. So it's just from somebody who has symptoms. So if you've got, you know, whatever it is, so some lung fluid, for example, is then put into a petri dish that given all kinds of antibiotics and some form of nutrition, which is usually fetal bovine serum. And the culture is the Vero cell culture, which is monkey kidney cells. So again, we've got other animals involved in this, so it's other animal material. So that's the reason for mentioning that. So we're not just from the material from the humans, we now have other material from other animals. And also, as I say, antibiotics and antimycotics, because the theory is that we've got to kill off any bacteria or fungi that are in there, just so that it can be a sterile sample. to give it a sterile,
It
yes.
sounds very sterile, yeah.
Yes. So then this concoction is left for a while. They add some more antibiotics. They reduce the fetal bovine serum, which is the so-called nutrient. And then after a few days, they discover that the cell is breaking down, and they say, oh, the cytopath, that's called the cytopathic effect for anyone who's looked into this at all, and say, oh, well, that's evidence of a virus. So the virus was in there, totally ignoring the fact that they have poisoned and starved the cells. And that's why the cells are breaking down and dying. And that's the real reason, which again goes back to the terrain model, which is that the body is affected by its environment. So if you put the body in an environment where there's poison and the body is starved, then it's not going to be functioning very well, and the cells can start breaking down. So this breakdown of the cells is alleged to be proof of the virus. This material is then taken out of the cell culture. It goes through various processes, which include freezing, staining, heating, and bombarding with electrons.
But that's all going to change everything again.
Well, this is the whole point. And then it goes through a procedure where a slice is taken and then goes through the electron microscope. And then when they see these little circles, they say, oh, that's a virus. And the point that you made is exactly the point that is missed throughout most of these scientific studies. I can't call them experiments, these scientific studies, that they're totally ignoring the processes and the procedures that they're using. And this was pointed out by an incredibly intelligent man, Dr. Harold Hillman. Sadly, he died a few years ago. He was a cell biologist, and he was talking about this from 40, 50 years ago, just exposing the problems with the procedures and saying that people who work with cell biology are totally ignoring what they're using, that they are incorporating poisons and starvation. So again, he wasn't talking about the virology cell culture, but he was saying it when in terms of looking at the cell, because the cell's supposed to contain a whole load of different organelles. And he said it's physically impossible. The geometry just doesn't allow for it. So again, that's why the way that we talked about, what's in a cell, well, he said, that's for the most part, they are artifacts. And he and plenty of other people, well, I'd say not in terms of virology, but plenty of other people have been saying that these circles that we are told are viruses are simply artifacts of the cell breaking down, and experiments have been conducted that have gone through exactly the same procedure, but without the sample from the human, whether it's supposed to contain a virus or not. So there's no original sample. They go through the exact same processes, adding all the toxins and feeding, the feed and nutrition and reducing that. And the cell breaks down in exactly the same way.
Exactly. How strange. What a revelation.
Yes. And that's why the virology is not a true science, that there is, and that's why we are saying there's no evidence for the existence of pathogenic viruses.
Yeah.
Because, once you look at that, you think, well, this is just cellular breakdown, the natural processes of the cell breaking down because it's been poisoned and starved. Yeah. And there's a lot that can be learnt from that. That's what happens to our bodies if our bodies are poisoned and starved.
Yeah, which they are on an ongoing basis. By starved, you don't necessarily mean, nutritionally or calorie deficient to the point where you're wasting away. It is also that you're nutritionally deficient in the basic building blocks of life. That's also a starvation event, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, I know there are plenty of people who manage very well on extended fasts. I mean, there are some people who claim to be breatharians, but that's a whole other way of life, and that takes quite a lot more control over the whole mind system and the body and understanding. I mean, we do collect energy from the atmosphere. But in terms of, as you say, starvation, I mean, that's the nutrients the body requires.
Yes.
Nutrients, building blocks. So again, we're talking about things like the basic minerals. And so we could be talking about something like tissue salts, which are requirements that, the body that can
Minerals in energy form.
In energy form, absolutely. So the body does require energy, but certainly it will break down if it's under constant bombardment and exposure to toxins, without there being something that can help support the body to eliminate or to process and eliminate those toxins.
In that case, that would be a good point to segue into talking a little bit about toxins, if you would.
Yes.
Because this is a really interesting area, because it's so pervasive.
That's what I was going to say. It is, because toxins are ubiquitous, but this is not about scaring people. This is about helping people understand what toxins are, where they are. And because when you know where they are, you can take action to reduce your exposure. So you can start looking at labels of the products that you buy. You can start making informed choices. You can start making changes. It's not about, oh, I've got to throw everything else away and start again. It's to start just taking steps, moving forward to, as I say, not from a place of fear, but from taking responsibility, taking control, and realizing, oh, right, okay, these products have this in them. I don't want to be exposed to that. Therefore, I will choose something different. Yeah. So again, it's about choices, from a place of being informed. And because there's a huge amount, it's always a process. So we're constantly learning where these toxins are. So there are toxins in the food manufacturing industry. I mean, start looking at food additives, just looking at flavorings and colorings alone. There are so many. I mean, one of the things I remember from, within the book, the flavoring, within the flavoring industry, there's a whole industry for flavorings. And in order to create the flavor strawberry, there are 30 different substances, 30 different chemicals make up the flavor strawberry. Where you say, well, okay, how about strawberry? Just use strawberry.
But the real deal, yeah.
The real deal. But of course, these are things, the shelf life, and they want, long shelf life. And of course, real strawberries don't have a long shelf life. They grow, they ripen, they're ready to eat. And if they're not eaten, they start to decay. Now, the decay is not because of bacteria, it's because the strawberry is going through its cycle. And if it's not eaten, it will just start to decay and return to the ground, return to nature, because that's the way nature works. Because if nature didn't do that, we'd be miles high in detritus, the whole, and just be deeper and deeper the whole time.
Just as a quick aside, when you said about shelf life, then you're talking about preservative chemicals in food. And I remember reading somewhere a little while ago now that the bodies in the morgues, they can keep them for weeks because they're not decomposing because of the amount of preservatives they've been ingesting during their entire lifetime. So the bodies are getting preserved as well.
That doesn't surprise me. Yes, yeah. I mean that is one of the problems, even though it's seen as, well, we're killing the bacteria so that whatever it is can, this food product can last longer. But killing the bacteria isn't the problem, because going back to what we were saying before, bacteria aren't the cause of anything. The reason that they are there is because whatever it is starting to break down naturally. Yeah. And that's why you see bacteria in something that's breaking down, why you see fungi, because they are part of nature's way of breaking everything down into component parts so it can be returned to nature and recycled. Because
it's a recycling program, just like it is in your compost pile. If you had no bacteria in your compost pile wouldn't work. But more importantly, you have more bacterial DNA inside your body than you have human DNA, from what I've read as well.
Yes, I
if DNA is such a thing.
Well, yes, exactly. There is that, but as you say, that's a slightly different.
Yeah.
Yes. The point really, from what you're saying, is that bacteria are part of us. We cannot survive without bacteria in our bodies. They do not cause anything, and which also leads to the idea there's good and bad bacteria. Well, no, the bacteria are there, and again,
In
we're talking
response to the environment, which ties back to the Bruce Lipton stuff and everything in terrain.
it does indeed, and there will be different forms of bacteria in different parts, in different environments,
Yes.
but not because there are different types. It's because there's something called pleomorphism, which is where the bacteria actually change their own form according to their environment. And so if they're in
Intelligent little critters, aren't they?
they are amazingly intelligent. Yes, they are. Yes. And yeah, the idea that there are super bugs or whatever, but that's because they're trying to scare us, that people need to take something even stronger to kill, and the last thing you want to do is kill your bacteria. They are extremely important, especially in the gut, where a lot of health problems can start if there's an imbalance.
So when you take a death pill, because antibiotics, anti is against and bios is life, so a death pill,
Yes.
you're then destroying the very thing that's doing its level best to keep you alive and in balance.
Yes, I'd say that's one way of putting it. So that's another, it's not very popular, but that's another kind of toxin, which are the things that are called medicine, the pharmaceuticals, like we were saying before about the pharmaceuticals being one of the greatest killers. They are causing harm. And if people are uncomfortable with that idea, I may suggest they look up the word iatrogenesis, which is, death by the medical system. But, the looking at, and also recognizing that many medicines are taken off the market, and anything that is allowed to be on the market has to go through certain procedures and allowed to be viewed as safe and effective. So anything that's on the market is assumed to be safe and effective, and then
until it's not.
Until it's not. So as I say, that raises question marks over these products that are then taken off the market. That's because they're only looking at certain aspects. They're not necessarily looking at long-term effects. Sometimes the studies are only short-term studies, as I said. They're also not, they do not perform studies on the interactions of every single pharmaceutical. I mean, there are thousands of them. And
well, as an example, my mother took a morning sickness pill that was very popular at the time when she was pregnant with me, and I'm glad she stopped taking it, which is called thalidomide.
Yes,
And that had fairly interesting results for people.
It certainly did. It's still used, but not for that. They've found another purpose for it, which is one of the other things that they do. Yes. And certain drugs are taken off when they're found to have what are called side effects, but they find the side effects are actually quite dramatic, and really people are having more problems after taking these substances. So again, it's hard for people to take the concept that products that are called medicine are actually harmful, but they can be. And as you say, antibiotics are one of the main ones, because they are destroying, as you say, the bacteria and in our gut. And there's all kinds of, again, side effects. Have to put side effects in inverted commas, because they're not. They are direct effects. If you hadn't taken that, you wouldn't have had that side effect. Only, of course, they say, well, it's a side effect. Oh, you now need to have this other drug to counteract those particular effects. And that's why there's something called polypharmacy, where people are on a whole range of different so-called medicines or pharmaceuticals. And horrified to hear some people are on 10, 15 so-called medicines. And I think you'd be hard pushed to find the evidence of that number having been tested for their
in that particular sequence and interaction. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, they say certain drugs are contraindicated against certain other ones. So there are some that are tested in combinations. So I mean, they're the main ones. But I mean, because heart disease and strokes, I mean, they've got so many people on different pills for the main things are for what they call hypertension, which is high blood pressure. So and also cholesterol. So they've got people on statins. They're two of the bigger drugs. But when you look at, again, in statins, they're very harmful because it's based on a complete misunderstanding of cholesterol. So yes, I mean that's why the whole pharmaceutical industry is just one aspect of the toxins that we're
Well,
exposed
can we
to.
look at some others then? So, for example,
Yes,
personal care products,
yes, absolutely. I was going to
things
say
like the equivalent of rat poison being in toothpaste and stuff like that.
that. Yes, yes, like fluoride.
Oh, fluoride's another good one, yeah.
Oh, right. I thought that's what you were referring to. Yes, the products again for that same reason, preservatives because they want long shelf life for whatever the products
Yeah.
are, and going back to colorings as well, and I say flavorings, but there's also what's called, the perfume side of things, so the actual scents. And once you start looking at the chemicals that are used for perfumes,
Well, they can be endocrine disruptors as well, can't they?
a lot of these chemicals are endocrine disruptors, and that's why people are having all kinds of problems with either getting pregnant or staying pregnant. So again, miscarriages, there's an increase in that. There's also a lowering of fertility. So
Well, one of
that's
the
all part of
fertility
the
things, Dawn, also could be the amount of female hormone pill in the drinking water in the cities, especially where they recycle it constantly.
There is, yes, of course, all the chemicals that are released from factories and also released from households that go into the wastewater system.
Yeah.
They say they've got filters, but they're not filtering out everything. And the other thing, of course, is they're adding chlorine to kill the germs, but of course that's adding a toxin. And whatever their systems are, they really aren't suitable for filtering out all the chemicals, and certainly the pharmaceuticals, as you say, with the contraceptive pill chemicals. So that's creating all kinds of effects, but not just for us for drinking water, because that's going into the environment. So it's affecting wildlife as well.
Yep.
It goes into the groundwater, and just yes, I mean animals, but also plants, agriculture, food production. So much is affected by the water that then comes out. So in any kind of waterway, all waterways can be poisoned by the effluent from chemical, not even just chemical companies, from any kind of industrial production. They're chucking out their waste, so into the water, but also into the atmosphere as well.
Yeah.
So when they're sort of burning stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, personal care, household products, household cleaning products. Again, the whole thing of using bleaches to, kill 99% of all known germs and that kind of thing. So yes, again, so this is where the germ theory, it does pervade a whole load of areas of our life that are not just the infectious disease aspect of it. So again, the idea that we have to clean our homes to make them sterile. And that's not to say we shouldn't clean, again, to be, but we can use simple things to clean,
Bicarb of soda, white vinegar,
absolutely.
they're really
Yes,
good.
lemons,
Yep.
lemons are really good at getting through lime scale, because again, depending on the water.
If you wanted to take it to a little more of an extreme, you can age your own urine and it becomes ammonia. You can use that for cleaning as well. It's very effective.
There are all kinds of
Yep.
alternatives.
Yep.
It's just that it takes their power away. We have to buy the products, and so we're giving our money and energy. So again,
Yes.
this is all part of taking responsibility back. And
Yep.
and there are more companies coming up with natural or somewhat more natural cleaning products, personal care products, and again, it's without being too detailed about it. It's really to start looking at the labels of what you're buying and to just become more aware. And if you can't even pronounce most of the names on a label, you might want to say, do I really want to put this on my body? Certainly if it's a personal care product.
But the thing to remember there is you're incredibly porous. So what you put on you, you're actually putting inside of you, like deodorants that have got aluminium in them to stop you sweating. You could use a crystal rock deodorant like potassium chloride, something like that, or magnesium chloride, that are very natural, that don't stop you sweating, but they stop the body odor, which is what you're really after. You don't want to stop the perspiration. But you're absolutely right. The personal care products are huge. Makeups, and all sorts of things like that. Shampoos that have got sodium lauryl and sodium lauryl sulfate, which is a very low molecular weight ionic based cleaner that they clean garage floors and workshops with. I suspect that's why a lot of hairdressers get very shaky hands if they've been using those kind of chemicals for years and years, day on day on day on.
Yes, I would say hairdressers are exposed to a lot of all kinds of
And nail
chemicals
technicians.
yes, from all kinds of things that are then off-gassed. It's not
Yeah.
just coming into physical contact, as you
Yes.
say, that the skin absorbs as well
Yeah.
as ejects. It's a two-way system
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
like we were saying before, we can, the body expels stuff through the skin, but it also absorbs.
Well, same with clothes, isn't it? You get
Mm,
is it polyester that mimics estrogen?
I believe so. Yes.
So,
Yes.
wearing polyester underwear, fellas, you
Mm.
want to have a think about that because you don't need more of that. You need some, certainly, just like you need progesterone, which we'll cover in another talk. But it's becoming aware of the level of toxicities of things like that, which is probably then a good one to step into the next one, which is the non-native EMFs you were talking about, because they're also a severe form of toxicity that, because I think people can't see it, hear it, and they don't really realize what it's doing massive damage to them.
Yes. Um, the starting point also is to realize that all electrical equipment does emit some kind of electromagnetic frequency. It's that with those, the distance does actually help. So the further away, you don't, if you're not really next to something, you're less likely to be affected. So again, you don't want pregnant women to be standing next to all the, standing in the kitchen beside all that electronic equipment all the time. So again, it's being aware and maybe just, taking some distance away from just, as I say, ordinary electrical appliances. Then we have the phone, the Wi-Fi, and they are, they're emitting a different level of frequencies. And that is why, again, saying before about our bodies being energetic, energy systems, our bodies are electromagnetic. We have, well, I mean, people know that the heart rate is measured electrically, and so is the brainwave rate. So, we know we're electrical, and yet at the same time, the whole medical system completely ignores that aspect and only treats the body chemically. Sorry, excuse me. So as we learn more about that, we're learning how our natural frequencies are being really disturbed by these non-native frequencies, and that's why some people can get so sensitive, their bodies can become so sensitive that they can't even be in a room where there's a Wi-Fi. They can't be near a phone, and that there's sorry, excuse me. Some people say that there's no evidence for the detrimental effects of EMFs, and I would say that there's more than enough evidence. There is a report, the Bioinitiative report, is one of those that has collated many hundreds of studies.
1800 plus, isn't it?
Yes, yes. I don't know what the latest one, so I was going to say it was more recent. It was certainly.
I've got a link to it on my website.
Right, okay, yes. So there's more than enough information to show that there are definite disturbances.
Yeah.
And definitely with children, more serious effects because they are developing, they are growing.
Yeah.
And so their natural systems can be put out of balance. So again, this is keeping the body in doing our best to keep our body in a certain range of balance, so it's not, like I said, not like it's got to be at a certain point. We can have a certain amount, but as long as it's returned. So in the same ways, which we'll come to in a second with the stress thing, you can have a stress if it's short-lived, and then the body comes back and it's, you've gone through it, the body restores the homeostasis. So it's not to avoid it completely, but when we're bombarded by Wi-Fi and EMFs and 4G, 5G, all of that, they are affecting us all of the time. So there are ways to mitigate that, and really just awareness is the starting point. To be aware that there's a potential problem, not to be frightened, but to be aware and then to start taking action, to say, okay, well, I'll reduce that. I'll turn the Wi-Fi off. And also to take actions that will mitigate it. So, for example, grounding. To be outside in nature, away from your, not have your phone with you, but just be barefoot on the ground, just take some time out. So the whole idea of tree huggers are weird. There's trees are very grounded, so there's nothing wrong with connecting with trees, but having your bare feet on the ground and just for some time does help to dissipate or readjust the body to its natural level.
Yeah, and there's things you can do as well that you can stay grounded for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, like with an earthing sheet, and then have it not necessarily wired through the earth socket in the house, but to actually put a grounding rod outside and run the cable into the house that way, because you can still get dirty electricity in the house. So that can also be a problem. So I actually am going to cover that on a little talk I'm going to do about earthing. Hugely beneficial, and they use it in things like the Tour de France for injury recovery, rapid injury recovery, so they can continue racing, which is one of the most grueling physical events ever invented, I think.
Well, as you say, there are plenty of ways of mitigating all of this, and I'm sure, as you say, that's what you're going to be covering.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the final one then would be one that I think is really interesting because it's largely not covered, but it's vital, which is stress. And I'm going to say stress and belief because we've shoehorned that one in there, or it fits in there anyway.
Yes, stress, thoughts, beliefs. As I just said, stress isn't all bad. If we're doing exercise, we're stressing our body. It's a question of, that's good. That gets your body active. It's a question of how quickly your body recovers and then returns to homeostasis. So again, the recovery after that exercise, and when you get yourself, puffed out or whatever, just to the quicker you return to homeostasis, your recovery, that shows that your body is able to then bring itself back to that level. So that's one indicator of being able to manage that. So again, the stress. So being excited about something, being joyful, that's a good stress, if you like. There's a book, The Stress of Life, that was written by Hans Selye. I think that's how you pronounce it. So he was talking about stress, and he said that two different types. He called the good stress, which is the excitement, with the joy and the exhilaration that we can feel. He called that eustress. So again, that's based on Greek. And the stress that we're probably more familiar with, the what we call bad stress, which is detrimental to the body, he called that distress. And that can be caused by, again, a whole range of factors. So fear is one of them, which is why it is used quite often in ways that to control us. So not taking responsibility for ourselves and deferring to other people and relying on other people, it makes it stressful because it's we're kept in fear, so we don't feel we can actually do anything for ourselves because we're told we can't do anything for ourselves. We have to rely on outside sources, and that outside source is just keeping us in fear. So the body isn't getting that opportunity to come back to homeostasis, to recover. So it's kept in a persistent stress, and that puts a great strain on the body in the hormone system. Different. So cortisol and adrenaline are overproduced. I mean, again, the medical system thinks that they can interfere and just give drugs that regulate, because the body is always regulating up and down. It's not that there's a level that is the right level, but that's what these drugs will do, just keep you at a level, whereas it doesn't allow for any movement around, because the body can bring itself back. But when in constant stress, these hormones are being, and again, I'm not going to go into sort of question marks about what hormones actually are and how we know these things, but there's definitely chemicals that are being overproduced in the body, and we feel it. We feel the effects. We don't feel comfortable, and we can get all kinds of symptoms, so headaches or whatever from all of this, and that's putting an extra strain on the body. So there are going to be effects. Now, the thing that is interesting, of course, is that that fear can be something real, because that's the body's normal reaction system of fight or flight. So if you're out somewhere and a wild animal turns up, your body has to be ready to react. So that's the fight or flight. You either stay and fight, or the body shuts down what it doesn't need, so digestive system, whatever, and so that you can actually flee, so you can actually run away. So that's the standard, fight or flight. Now that's a real situation. So you've got a real threat in front of you, but the mind doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. So it doesn't have to be real. So it could be something that you are told that could happen, that is very scary, that your body can go into exactly the same response, even though it's not something that is real.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be real for your body to respond to how your mind reacts.
Mm-hmm.
And
well,
that
sorry, I was going to say that then
point
is how many, it is critical, that one, because, and how many people recycle things over and over in their mind that haven't even happened, that cause the same response in their body. And certainly with things like adrenaline, if you aren't having an explosive burst of energy to clear that, it's not going to do you any good long term.
Exactly. And there are so many ways that we can have these ongoing fears. It could be that there's a hereditary disease that you might get.
Yep.
And we know from the placebo nocebo effect that belief alone can actually manifest exactly what that fear
Could you
is.
talk a little bit about that, because that fascinates me, especially the nocebo bit?
Yes, placebo is probably the better known of the two terms. I mean, placebo pills, which are inert sugar pills, are used extensively by the medical establishment in their double-blind placebo-controlled studies, where they test a real pharmaceutical product against a sugar pill to see what reactions and responses that the people will actually experience.
Yep.
So the placebo effect is the beneficial outcome from something that is not an actual pharmaceutical. So they need to know what level of placebo effect is likely to occur, because they need to measure the actual, so they think of the pharmaceutical, the actual pharmacological component that they're testing, their drug. So they're looking for beneficial effects. So somebody who has symptoms and the symptoms stop.
Can I add something in there, that the stuff I've read is really interesting on that too, that the bigger the pill, the more pronounced the effect, and that an injection has a more pronounced effect than a pill. But it doesn't just apply to those two, it also applies to surgery as well.
Yes, absolutely. Surgeries again, and also the color of the pill can make a difference as well. There are all kinds of different ideas of, or different studies of different colors, different, as you say, shape, sizes. There are it's a well-known phenomenon, the placebo. So that's the beneficial outcome. The opposite is the nocebo, which is a detrimental outcome from something where there should be no response. And this is where I think the placebo effect or nocebo effect is not quite sufficient to describe exactly what's going on, because it actually shows the power of the mind that's coming
belief
into this. Yes, the power of belief, the power of thought, power of our own, what we invest into what's going on.
Yep.
So the nocebo effect is where, as I say, there's a detrimental effect, and there's one that I think is, example that I think is worth sharing, which is on a chemotherapy drug trial. One of the participants exhibited symptoms, her hair fell out and she was experiencing vomiting, and was rather surprised to discover she was on the placebo.
No way.
In the placebo group, yes. So she manifested, because knowing she was in a chemotherapy drug trial,
Yep.
and again, the expectation, because there's a certain amount that we know about, chemotherapy, some of the so-called side effects, but some of the effects are,
So some of the direct effects of poisoning are, yeah.
Yes, and these particular types of poisoning that are called chemotherapy, hair loss and vomiting, they can be quite common. And she exhibited those symptoms and discovered, as I say, she was on the placebo. So again, this is how powerful the mind is. So again, as well as the symptoms, that mind can actually manifest what is then labeled as a disease, which is why people being told that a particular disease, certainly like cancer, is hereditary and there's a risk that they may get it, they're then focusing their mind on something, as you say, this worry, this perpetual worry of what might happen. Oh, I'm going to get it, it's in the family, that they're in that mind loop. And again, recognizing that the body doesn't have to be a real threat for something to happen within the body, and we can actually manifest those symptoms that are then given that label called cancer.
It reminds me, I read years ago, I might not have this accurate, but I think it was called pointing the bone in the voodoo cultures.
Yes, absolutely.
Where the person will die. And it strikes me that when the doctor gives you a diagnosis, and die means two, doesn't it? So it's two thoughts. He gives you a diagnosis that you have cancer. He's effectively, in many people's cases, handing you a death certificate. And I've read cases, or stories certainly, where someone died of cancer. They did the autopsy and they didn't have cancer, and it turns out the doctor had inadvertently read them someone else's diagnosis, not their own.
Oh, wow.
Which is the nocebo effect again.
It is. I've heard that people who've been given a prognosis, so, oh, doctor, how long have I got? Whatever it is, and they die pretty much on time, within that. The doctor then thinks they're really clever because they've predicted it correctly, but it's because the patient has given their belief entirely to the doctor, to the consultant, and that they have obeyed the instruction and they have died. And on autopsy, it has been found that their body does not contain sufficient pathology to justify their death. So again, the same thing, so they haven't died of the disease. And again, many autopsies of people who have had other causes of death attributed to the reason that they've died have been found with cancer, if you like, but never enough to have killed them. And again, I don't think it's the cancer anyway that it's because it's not a disease, it's the condition. So if the condition continues and if nothing changes, the body will deteriorate. So
I've always thought of cancer as your body's last-ditch attempt to keep you alive, to get your attention that you've got a severe issue going on and you need to make some changes now.
I would agree totally. And I've had that from a number of different cases. And I think in many instances, it is, a great big red flag. It's a warning sign. And, it requires you to make some changes. But again, it requires you also to have gone to the doctor in the first place to get those tests done, and for them to then, give you that diagnosis. So again, it's trying to look at health and symptoms in a completely different way that stops you focusing on these labels and these names, that the symptoms mean a specific condition, as opposed to, my body is looking after itself. Now, it doesn't mean that you ignore symptoms that aren't short-term, that aren't self-limiting. So again, certain situations where you think, oh no, there's something else going on. But again, not to have a label attached to it, but to realize that the body's giving you a message that it requires some attention. It's asking for you to do something different, to change what's going on. So what you are exposing yourself to physically and mentally.
Dawn, that was incredible. Thank you. In closing then, is there any particular advice you'd like to give to my audience of more than 55-year-old men that are interested in a more holistic approach to their health? I mean, you've covered everything, in case you just wanted to summarize anything.
Well, again, in terms of advice, I think one of the things with when we as we age, we get the idea of, you know, deterioration with age is natural. It's, oh, well, you're getting older, you're going to fall apart. Everything's going to start going wrong. I think to a certain extent that's a
nocebo.
Well, that's a nocebo effect.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's also to stop people from taking responsibility. And of course, this is about taking responsibility.
Yes.
And it's to say, well, that doesn't have to happen. Now, yes, you know, I've got some grey hair and a few wrinkles and stuff and whatever, but that doesn't mean my body's deteriorating. But I am doing things to help support my body, to strengthen it, to keep it stronger, to improve, because I'm not going into denial, because that's the other thing. Oh, you know, it's not denial,
yeah.
but it's saying there's a lot I can do to help support my body.
Yes.
And you know, maybe it's had a few more knocks because, you know, a few decades of knocks and things that have happened over the past.
Yeah.
And, you know, surgeries and all sorts of things that we've gone through that, you know, body might need a little bit more support for a little bit longer, but not to feel that it's, you know, well, there's nothing I can do, because that's the whole point, that there is something we can do. And it's a question of taking steps. It's not like, oh, I've got to do it all now.
Yeah.
It's to start taking steps and then see the progress and then take some more steps. And then it's recognizing that health also is a state of well-being. It's how you feel about yourself as well. So
exactly.
It's really to say, yeah, I can do something about this. And it is taking responsibility and recognizing that you know, we know more about our own bodies than anybody else, you know,
exactly.
each of us, and recognize what we can do, what our bodies can do, and say, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
I can make some changes.
That's wonderful advice. I'm sorry my video kept cutting in and out. I was watching, I can see it in the corner of my screen. I thought that must have been really distracting for you, but you did so well with that. Thank you so very much for that. And I would encourage everybody, if you have interest in this subject, and I hope you do, because it's the foundation for everything that we're going to do from here on in, that you grab a copy of Dawn and David's book and actually have a good read through that. It's a reference book for me more than anything, because you can go in there and look at any particular disease and set of symptoms, and you'll find out the real backstory to it, and it's an absolute eye-opener.
Thank you.
It's all right. Dawn, thank you. If you'll stay on the line, we can chat some more in just a minute, but thank you so much for that. I appreciate you very much.
I appreciate you too. Thank you, Adrian.
Now, how interesting was that? Wasn't that good? Isn't that thought-provoking stuff? It really is. And the idea that contagion's not a thing, amazing.